Good morning, everyone. I'm recording this sermon on Saturday afternoon when it's absolutely pouring outside. I had hoped to be able to catch a break in the middle of one of the downpours to at least be out on the deck, but every time I thought that was going to be a possibility to start raining again. You may hear in the background two very unhappy kitties because I won't let them outside on the screen porch in the midst of all this rain because all they want to do is turn around and come back in. We all know how that works with our pets. They go out, they come in, and we're the door attendants, aren't we? I hope this week, even in the midst of the rain, you've had an opportunity to enjoy the beauty around us. It is fall in Southern Virginia. And yesterday at a parishioner's house, I was so happy to see that even in the middle of fall, there are beautiful things still blooming. My common spiderworts that bloomed earlier this summer are blooming again. And it's lovely to see that as well, as I anticipate trying to get all those leaves up. Today, we hear Jesus tell us the parable of the king who gave a wedding banquet. A reading from the 22nd chapter of Matthew. Once more, Jesus spoke to the people in parables, saying, "The kingdom of heaven may be compared to a king who gave a wedding banquet for his son. He sent his slaves to call those who had been invited to the wedding banquet, but they would not come. Again, he sent other slaves, saying, 'Tell those who have been invited, look, I have prepared my dinner. My oxen and my fat calves have been slaughtered, and everything is ready. Come to the wedding banquet.' But they made light of it and went away, one to his farm, another to his business, while the rest seized his slaves, mistreated them, and killed them. The king was enraged. He sent his troops, destroyed those murderers, and burned their city. Then he said to the slaves, 'The wedding is ready, but those invited were not worthy. Go therefore into the main streets and invite everyone you find to the wedding banquet.' Those slaves went out into the streets and gathered all whom they found, both good and bad, so the wedding hall was filled with guests. But when the king came in to see the guests, he noticed a man there who was not wearing a wedding robe, and he said to him, 'Friend, how did you get in here without a wedding robe?' And he was speechless. Then the king said to the attendants, 'Bind him hand and foot and throw him into the outer darkness, where there will be weeping and gnashing of teeth. For many are called, but few are chosen.'" The Gospel of the Lord. Praise to you, Lord Christ. As a preacher, I learned a long time ago not to make broad statements about people's lives. There is no way that we can possibly know each other so well that I can say general things about us as a group and not find somebody who's an exception. But I think I will take a risk today. I'm going to risk that it is true when I say that most of us here have never been truly starving hungry. I have no doubt that some of us have been hungry. There have been times when there was little in the house until payday, perhaps. And some of us here, especially our mothers, may have chosen to eat very little so that the children would have something to eat. My mother didn't have to do that, but I know my father's mother and grandmother both did. My dad's mother worked very hard to help keep food on the table during the Depression, and sometimes there just wasn't enough to go around. When I was little and would visit Kansas, I was amazed at how she could make a chicken last for so many meals by using homemade noodles and dumplings to extend a meal. And I have to tell you, when there wasn't chicken, somebody would go out in the farm field and shoot a rabbit. And to this day, I still think rabbits and chicken taste the same. I thought that was wonderful food. Actually, it was survival food. We all know what that is. Mac and cheese, or a lot of beans to go with a very few weenies. Survival food. That's what you have when there is no money and no way to get more food. It's what there might be. Now, we all know that human bodies don't exist without food. But we also need to remember that there are many kinds of food. The food that we eat is critical to our continued physical existence. But so is food of the mind and food of the spirit. I think both of them are just as critical to life as the food of the body is. You may have heard of the studies of children who have been hospitalized or institutionalized for long times and never held as babies, as toddlers. They've never known a loving touch or been held and cuddled. Often they grow up with a great many problems because their spirits were not fed with human care and concern. And in turn, they don't know how to express human care and concern for other people. There are other kinds of food that we try to sustain ourselves with. Our society is always telling us that if we buy the right kind of deodorant soap, then everyone is going to love us. If we have the latest big screen TV, then people are going to flock to our house to watch the football game. Well, maybe not these days. And of course, we all have to have the right snacks and soft drinks to keep everybody in the house happy. You all know, as I do, many people who are tempted to buy their children toys that are inappropriate or dangerous for them to buy their love. We also know parents who try to be their children's friends, not their parents. We know friends and lovers who buy their relationships with things, not with true love. In the end, those kinds of food never feed people. We think they do because that's what society tells us all the time. And we think that having things and people who like us because of the TV that we have, or the car that we drive, or the house that we live in, well, we all are trained to think that those things will fill us up. And I suspect we all do know someone whose life is tied up that way. I think of it as looking for food in all the wrong places, and it is a form of trying to buy love, in a way. Instead of finding the love that comes from knowing God, we look for love in ways that are not healthy, spiritually or physically, for us. I wonder if that's what happened with all the folks who could not come to the wedding banquet. We don't know why they didn't show up, but I wonder if it was because they were spending time with those things in their lives that had falsely filled them up. Somebody reminded me just the other day of a camp song that celebrates this story. I'm going to try to sing it. We'll see how this works. And all the folks sing that they cannot come because they have a new cow, or fields, or commitments. In other words, many excuses. I cannot come to the banquet, don't trouble me now. I have married a wife, I have bought me a cow. I have fields and commitments that cost a pretty sum. Pray hold me excused, I cannot come. But the poor do come. They come because they know what it's like to be hungry. They are not going to let any fields or cows get in the way of being fed because they have no fields or cows to blind them to their need for food. They also know that they will be fed with the right kind of food at this banquet. For this is the King's banquet. All this week I've been reflecting about whether or not I would accept the King's invitation. So I guess there are finally two parts to my answer. Number one, am I hungry enough? If I'm not, I might be tempted to skip the banquet. And number two, is my life so busy that I don't know how empty it is? Am I too busy doing this and that to see that what I am doing keeps me from attending the most important banquet of my life? Often this parable is used solely to talk about the fact that some will be at the King's banquet and some will be banished from the banquet. That's judgment. Judgment from the King. But we all have to realize that the judgment that comes from the King does not happen without the guest's choices first. We are the invited guests who can choose to pay attention to the hunger in our hearts, the hunger for true love, for a relationship with the King, and say, I want to be at that banquet. The King invites everyone from the streets to his banquet. But it's not only about wanting to be at the banquet. We have to put on our party clothes. I would bet that they don't have to be covered with jewels or brand new, but they do have to be clothes of joy and celebration. They have to be clothes that say, we want to be there. Not that we are just at that banquet because we have nothing else to do. Being hungry today is an odd thing to many human beings. For some of us, unfortunately, it's part of our daily lives, our daily physical lives. And that should not be. No one, child, adult, senior, should go to bed hungry with a stomach rumbling any night. But for many of us who live here in the United States, the hunger we feel is not physical, it's spiritual. We have food in our refrigerator, we have toys in the house, we have a roof over our heads, and clothes in the closet. And yet we are still hungry. And what I think we are all hungry for is the banquet of the King. But we don't always know it, do we? The question I think we must ask ourselves every day is, what am I hungry for today? And then ask the King to invite us to his banquet so that we will have a relationship of wholeness with the God and Father of all. Only then will we be wearing the wedding garments for the most amazing party of our lives. The party that will fill our hearts and spirits full to overflowing. That, my friends, is the amazing generosity of our King. Amen.